What's up, everybody? Welcome into the Next Pats podcast. I'm Phil Perry. We are hearing from the legend, Mel Kiper Jr., the one, the only, did a conference call with reporters 2 weeks ahead of the draft to talk about his 2-round mock draft and answer a variety of draft-related questions. He was phenomenal, as always. So great to hear from him. We're going to roll right into that conversation now because there were a handful of Patriots-specific, quarterback-specific questions for Mel Kiper. You're going to hear Tom Curran ask questions right off the top. You're going to hear a few more about the quarterbacks that could be available to the Patriots at 3 overall. JJ McCarthy specifically. You're going to hear Ben Volin from the Boston Globe ask a couple of questions as well. We will come back, and then we will lead into the next topic that interests me when it comes to Mel Kiper's opinion on some of these college prospects, and it has to do with receivers. But let's first get to our quarterback conversation with Mel Kiper, and you're going to hear him be a Drake Maye guy. Let's just put it that way. He explains why, if the choice is between Maye and McCarthy, why he would go with the former as opposed to the latter. Some great tidbits, as always, here from Mel Kiper. So here's that back and forth right now.
Who would make you the most worried if you were a GM for the New England Patriots picking at number 3 among the quarterbacks?
Tom,
and
it's a
why
great
is
question.
JJ? Sorry, go.
No.
You go straight out.
JJ McCarthy and Drake Maye. That's the two, Tom. If I miss anybody, just follow up with who you think you're discussing there and who could be in the mix. But if they're interested in Penix Jr. or Bo Nix down the line, but that's not going to happen if you're picking at 3 and you need a quarterback as desperately as they do. And I hope they protect and help the quarterback more than they did Mac Jones. I've said that numerous times, and I really believe that the O-line has to be addressed. The wide receiver position has to be addressed. So again, I have them taking Keon Coleman, wide receiver, Florida State, in the second round. An offensive lineman, certainly, well, you'd have no argument there from me. But Drake Maye, the concern is the late season inaccuracy with some throws. He's only 21 years of age. He's going to keep getting better. Certainly with JJ McCarthy having the team on your shoulder, you got to carry a team in the NFL. You're not going to be able to rely on a running game, a defense in the NFL. You got to be able to make plays at critical moments. And he did. I give him credit for that. In the national title game, he did do that. With his legs, and he made some throws where a couple balls were dropped. And he showed with his arm. He nothing phases him. He's really a guy who keeps his poise. He's in control. He's confident. He's a great kid. He's a tremendous competitor. So there's a lot to like about all these guys, but there's some elements that make you a little concerned. So I would say even with Jaden went from a 4th round pick to the number 2 pick overall, but like Burrow did. Burrow ascended in that second year. Caleb had some struggles late in the year, but he didn't have a good line. And didn't have Addison. So they're all different reasons why you can, after you make a pick, you get 3 years. If it doesn't work out, you second guess it, say, I should have known this. That was the red flag. That was the concern. But you got to take the concerns, guys. You got to take a concern you have and be able to coach through it. If you think you can coach through the concerns and you have the staff in place, you're going to have continuity with that staff. That's one of the biggest things with these quarterbacks. The coordinator, coach, everything remains the same. It doesn't change first year, second year, fourth year. If you have that happen, you're doomed. So again, I think a lot of it goes beyond just the quarterback and what his strengths and weaknesses are. A lot of this is on the organization that gets him. So if you handle Maye properly, handle McCarthy properly, I think you're going to have a solid quarterback. I think the guy that has a chance to be great of those two is Maye. McCarthy could be solid, but I think they're not a bust. So I think you look at it a little differently. If you want to hit the home run, I think you take Drake Maye.
Are you a coward if you trade down, or are you brave?
This would have to be. If I don't have strong conviction on Drake Maye or JJ McCarthy, you don't take them. So just because everybody else likes them or some people like this guy doesn't mean you have to like them. Look at all the busts that have gone in the top 10 of the first round over the years, right? So if you don't love these two, you don't take them. Then you say, well, do you love Michael Penix Jr. or Bo Nix? You got to like you got to love one of those 4. I mean, there's no way, or really like one of those 4 for a team that desperately needs a quarterback in a division with quarterbacks and a division, an AFC will load it with great quarterbacks. Are you kidding me? You got to get one of the 4. So it's going to be really interesting and fascinating to see which of the 4 they like the best. If it's not Maye or McCarthy, what do they do? Then you would trade out and take Penix Jr. or Nix. But again, I'd be surprised if it's not Drake Maye or JJ McCarthy. And right now I'm leaning Drake Maye.
I want to ask you specifically about JJ McCarthy. I saw you have him ranked as your 15th overall prospect. And all the other draft analysts I have a lot of respect for, Greg Cosell, Dane Brugler, Daniel Jeremiah, have JJ McCarthy rated as like a low first, second round kind of pick. And then you hear the reporting lately, he might be the top quarterback on the board of some of these teams. He might go above May or even Daniels. Why do you think there's some dissonance there?
Oh, I just try to close the gap. I am at 21, moved into 14, just because I wanted in 15 area, because I wanted to close that gap between McCarthy and May, but not get him to overtake May, but close that gap just a bit. But certainly at 14 or 21, wherever you have him, it doesn't really matter. You're not going to take him at 5 or 6. So I think it is overdrafting a quarterback if he goes that high. Even at 11, if you're 14, you're not taking the 11th. You got the 14th best player. You don't take him at 11. You can say, well, it's a quarterback. You got to do that. No, you don't. Trust your board. Your board and your rankings protect you against overdrafting, and overdrafting hasn't worked out great for teams, right? So at the quarterback position, but it seems like it's trending that Drake Maye goes early, and then JJ McCarthy is either right there with him or he's right behind him. And we know Drake's been locked into that third spot all along. And if JJ's right there or ahead, he's going to go there, or somebody like Minnesota is going to trade up and get him, or just take him at 11 if he slides down that far. So it looks like JJ McCarthy doesn't get past 11, which for me, having him at 14, or as you mentioned, the guys, you mentioned that, great respect for those guys, a great Cosell, Jeremiah, Daniel's a good friend there, wherever they have, they wouldn't take him at 6 or 5 or 11. So I wouldn't if I'm at 14. So again, that protects you against doing that. But if you're taking him, you got to have McCarthy rated as one of the 5 best players in this draft. You really have to.
I guess what I'm asking is, do we buy it then that he could be taken ahead of May and Daniels?
Well, it's what I put him as the quarterback behind May. So I didn't buy into that, what you hear. I'm not buying it, but I do have him going in the top group, which is what you hear is going to possibly happen. This is hard because you hear a lot of things. What do you value? And what do you truly believe? And that's why mock drafts are fun to do. They're a bit of a pain. That's why this is my final one. I have a lot of news and notes and projections on draft day morning, but I'm not going to lock into a mock. I will actually project a lot of things of what I think will happen, but locking into a mock prevents you from throwing out a lot of names that could be possibilities for different teams. And for JJ, I'm going to trust some of the intel, which suggests he goes inside of pick 11. And the Minnesota Vikings would be the team at 11, in that division with Goff and Caleb now in the division and Jordan Love emerging as a star. I'm big at it. I said this on every, media call we've done over the last 41 years. Yeah, you got to keep up with your division. If you're the 4th best quarterback in your division, you got no shot, unless you're lucky like the Steelers were last year and the guys get hurt, and have some injury issues within the division. You can sneak in, but you're not going anywhere. Okay. You might sneak in, but forget it after that. You'll be one and done. So you got to have the quarterback in the division. It's either 1 or 2. Or if there's great ones, you could be right in there with them, but you can't be a 4th or have distance between 4 and 3. And that's why I think Minnesota is going to take the quarterback.
All right, really interesting stuff there from Mel Kiper on both quarterbacks. And it does feel as though it's just interesting to me. His initial response to Tom basically indicates Jane Daniels isn't even going to be an option for the Patriots. He almost dismisses it. The way he answers the question, he sort of dismisses it out of hand. And again, we went over this earlier this week on Next Pads, but between Albert Breer the last few weeks, Adam Schefter, Mel Kiper is talking to people. He is plugged in. It just feels like this is the overwhelming sense is that Washington is taking Jaden Daniels, period, end of story. So conversation, if it's between May and McCarthy, I agree with Mel 100%. If you're looking for the guy that's going to allow you to compete in the AFC that has Patrick Mahomes and Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson and Justin Herbert, who gives you the better chance to ultimately have a quarterback that can run that race, that is in that weight class, so to speak? And the answer to me is obviously Drake Maye. I think JJ McCarthy has fine traits. I think he has win-with traits. I think you can win with JJ McCarthy. I just think you need a pretty damn good situation around JJ McCarthy in order to succeed. You need a good situation, period, for basically any quarterback to have real success at the NFL level. But I think to have the ultimate success, to be in that conversation for championships, you need to have the next level talent at quarterback and a good situation. So do the Patriots have that second thing yet? No, they don't. But if you feel like you can get the first thing in Drake Maye, do it. Because that's one box checked. Potentially. You still have some development to do. You have coaching to do. You have to make sure he grows and you nurture him the right way. So if you think that's what Drake Maye can be, you take him. To me, no questions asked. The situation would be different now if the Patriots were in the middle of the first round. If this was 2021, the Patriots are picking 15 overall, and you're telling me it's J.J. McCarthy or Mac Jones, then I would say go with J.J. McCarthy. If you're at 11 this year and you're sitting in that Minnesota seat, I would say go for J.J. McCarthy at that point in the first round. I just think at 3 overall, with where this team is, the opportunity you have to draft that kind of talent, I've been over it and over it and over it again. But it is obviously worthwhile. It's valuable, so valuable for us to be able to hear how Mel Kiper feels about this. You can't pass on the opportunity to draft that potentially next level kind of talent at quarterback. I did just add, before we get on to the receiver conversation there, in my back and forth with Mel on the receiver that he gave to the Patriots in the second round of his 2-round mock draft, he did give the Patriots Drake Maye at number 3 overall after Caleb Williams and Jaden Daniels went off the board 1-2. Before we get to the receiver portion of the conversation, I do just want to mention something that I found interesting. Listening to Albert Breer today during our conversation on the Patriots Talk podcast, where Albert, Tom Curran, myself, we all go through the positives, the pros, and the cons of all 3 of these quarterbacks, Daniels, Maye, and McCarthy. And one of the things that Albert mentioned when discussing Drake Maye was quote unquote nervous energy. And that was something that teams would have to sort through. How does he handle certain situations, especially before he's really fully settled in? You know, we saw it his pro day. He had a couple misses early, settled in eventually, and had a really nice rest of the day. You know, there are early game situations where Drake Maye has a hard time, but then is able to kind of calm down and settle in and play pretty well. Is that just he's 21 years old? Is it just something that is innate to his being and will be the case for him for a long time? Is it a sign of something else that teams are trying to comb through right now in terms of his ability to withstand the pressure of being a franchise quarterback? It's going to be different in New England or Washington or Minnesota than it is, or than it was, I should say, at North Carolina. I get it. People care about their football down there, and ACC, it's big time football. I don't mean to besmirch it in any way, shape, or form, but it's different when there's millions of dollars at stake and there are real stakes for professionals involved, coaching staffs, livelihoods, owners that are impatient and want to win. You know, it's a whole nother level when you get to the next level. And if there's any concern about how he might handle that, I think that is worth digging into. I still would want to take him, even if I had some questions about that, because I would probably, to me personally, be willing to chalk it up to a guy being pretty young. And he does seem to have real confidence. You know, everything I've heard about Drake Maye in terms of how he's met with teams and how he's projected the kind of personality that he's had, it's been very confident. It's been dynamic. It has been almost effervescent at times. And maybe Albert mentioning that to us today on the podcast is just one sign of how we have to comb through everything when it comes to pre-draft information. One person's effervescent might be another person's nervous energy. Right? So you could have 5 people in a room, all have been sitting in on the same meeting with the same person, and get 5 different sorts of reads on that person. And so it's not that any one of them is wrong, but I think you take them all and you say, okay, what is this going to mean when it comes to this guy's performance? Specifically here, specifically in New England, when we're talking about the football team, we're talking about a market that is used to winning. We're talking about an owner who is, I think, saying all the right things when it comes to his patience, but is, let's be honest, has been saying for years now that he would like to contend again and that it bothers him that they haven't won a postseason game. And he's over 80 years of age at this point. And so how does a person handle that? How J.J. McCarthy handles it, I think, would be something worth digging into as well. And just having spoken to a couple of different teams this morning about J.J. McCarthy and some of the opinions that vary and seemingly vary wildly on J.J. McCarthy. It is really interesting to me. People who love him, people who love his demeanor, people who love his game, the mechanics, the footwork, the moxie, the energy that he gives his teammates. But one conversation I had in particular today, I was told that there are people that are worried about how JJ McCarthy's wired. And I want to be careful as we talk about this, because he's been very open with dealing about how he has dealt with mental health issues. And when we're talking about how these guys may handle certain situations as professionals when they are still really, really young, again, JJ McCarthy's the youngest of the 4 quarterbacks that we're talking about at the top of the draft this year, 21 years old. How's he going to handle that situation at the next level if he's the guy, if he's the number 3 overall pick and he's the face of your franchise? I think there would be some teams who are a little bit concerned by that. And again, I do want to be careful about this because I know there are teams, again, talk about opinions varying with the same baseline information. I know there are teams that really like JJ McCarthy because of his backstory, because of what he's dealt with, how he's come out the other side, how he's handled everything as a really young person, how he's been open talking about it, and how he has been a voice for a lot of people in terms of what he's gone through mental health wise. And they look at that as a positive. They look at that as a strength. And they say, I like that about him. I think this could sound a little Neanderthalish, but it wouldn't surprise me based on NFL teams being the way they are and being wired how they're wired, being concerned about the things that they are generally speaking concerned with. There are going to be teams who look at the same things, who look at JJ McCarthy's same backstory and say, good for him. Congratulations. At the same time, I don't know if that's what I want from my quarterback. And again, that is almost hard for me to say, and I would disagree with it personally, but NFL teams are NFL teams, and they're concerned about what they're concerned about. And so I find all of this stuff, because it's all stuff that teams will contend with and teams will wrestle with, to be really, really interesting. And I think it's important for us to be able to have those discussions maturely and I think weigh them appropriately. Again, for me personally, how much would I weigh it? I think I would weigh it. I would lean on the side of weighing it in a positive fashion, because you're going to deal with some bleep, whether you're here or anywhere else, as a high first round pick quarterback going to what in all likelihood is a bad team. And if you've shown that you can deal with that stuff and come out the other side and still have the confidence that JJ McCarthy is lauded for having that alpha mentality and that winning mindset, I think that's incredibly impressive. But again, there was one conversation I had today where I was told pretty frankly, not all teams will see it that way. So let's put the quarterback conversation to the side for a moment. Let's be honest, we'll be revisiting it again, I'm sure, very soon. All we do is talk about quarterbacks this time of year. And let's get to this receiver conversation, because after giving Drake Maye to the Patriots at number 3 overall, Mel Kiper then at number 34 overall gave the Patriots Keon Coleman, wide receiver out of Florida State. Now, I find this to be a fascinating selection for a few reasons. Number one, if you go through Mel Kiper's mock draft, you get into the late 20s, you do see Brian Thomas Jr. go off at 28 overall, and then at 29 overall. Oh boy, there's a run on big-bodied, freaky athlete receivers, because Adonai Mitchell out of Texas goes to 29, goes to Detroit, at number 29. And then at number 32, just a few picks later, Kansas City Chiefs select Xavier Legette, wide receiver out of South Carolina. 3 big-bodied wideouts go off the board in the span of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 picks. Ooh, if you're the Patriots, that's got to hurt to watch that happen just a few picks ahead of where you sit. And would you consider trading up to make sure you get one of those guys, especially with Legette going off the board just 2 picks ahead of you? I really like his fit for New England. He checks a lot of the boxes for what would satisfy this Ron Wolf executive tree And he's exactly what the Patriots need in terms of being a bigger body who can threaten a defense vertically, who can catch and run, who can play on the boundary. That's what they need. They don't get it in this mock draft. Instead, they get Keon Coleman, who has the big body that we're looking for and has the contested catch ability. And you could play him on the boundary and throw him jump balls all day long because he's 6'3", 213 pounds. He had a 38-inch vertical and a 10.7 broad jump. Those are wild numbers. That's to go along with almost 9.5-inch hands, arm length of over 32 inches. Really, really good. The issue for Coleman is his speed, his timed speed. He ran a 4.61 40 at this year's combine. And that would be a team's reservation when it comes to Keon Coleman. Can he make acrobatic catches? Is he really well coordinated? Does he have that big bodied size to be able to wall off smaller defensive backs and make really difficult plays? Yes, 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 and yes. Is he fast enough for what the Patriots need? Especially the Patriots, right? They don't have that burner in their offense right now who is a consistent, usable player. Tyquan Thornton can run really fast. He has not proven that he is a consistently usable player. So I ask Mel Kiper about Keon Coleman and about any speed concerns that he might have, why he likes Keon Coleman. We got a nice little back and forth here on a guy who did not make our prototypical Patriots list this offseason because of that 4.61 time speed. But I think one comp that you'll hear from Kiper here will perk your ears up. And so I won't spoil it. Let's get to that conversation with Mel Kiper right now.
I just wanted to ask you about the second round pick that you actually made for the Patriots on your recent mock with Keon Coleman going to them in the 30s. Why do you like Keon Coleman as much as you do? I see he's in your top 10 of receivers. It's, everybody says it's a really deep receiver class this year. And does his 40 time concern you at all in terms of how he'll translate at the next level?
Yeah, that's why I have him going to New England in the early second, not putting him in the mid first or late first is because of that 40 time. Everybody I talked to said Keon Coleman runs a 4.5. He's a first rounder, runs a 4.6. He's a second rounder, and he ran 4.6. So again, you look at Keon at 4.6, 140, 6'3 and a quarter, 213 pounds with length, 38 vertical. I love that part. I love arm length and vertical tell you a lot. And because that's explosiveness, arm length separates everybody at positions. I'm big into that. You'll see that by the ratings whenever you come out. Arm length is huge. To me, the gauntlet, everybody talked about that a lot. Why is it important? That straight line and that ability to be fast on that straight line and then be able to catch the football when it comes your way. He did that. He had a couple concentration drops this past year late in the season. That was it. The basketball player at Michigan State before he got to Florida State. A kid who certainly has a punt returner, was outstanding as well. To me, when you look at where he goes, it's only because of the 40. Puka Nacua ran 4.57 last year, had the great gauntlet, became a 5th round steal for the Rams. Keon Coleman, 2nd round for the Patriots, I think, or anybody looking for a wide receiver in round 2. If he's on the board, you're only getting him at that point because of the 4.6 40. And like I said, he plays a lot faster than that.
Mel, do you think he could play outside in the NFL?
He, to me, is a guy with 6'3 and a quarter, 213 pounds, punt returner, dynamic player. You can put anywhere and create a matchup. He's got length. He's got some physicality to him. Contested catches go his way. He'll high point the ball because he's got the basketball ability, and those guys have great hand-eye coordination. The great thing with him is you can do what you want. You have versatility with Keon Coleman. So, yeah, to me, in the 2nd round, when I thought back in August, early to mid-September, I had him in my top. I remember when my first big board, I have to check it again. I might have had him at 10, 11, 12 on the big board. And because at that point in time, you're going by play speed, not 40 speed. So again, that's when the 40 speed pushed him into the 2nd. That tells me he'll probably be a pretty good pick, a really good pick for somebody in round 2.
You heard it there. Puka Nacua. Did you do what I did? When I heard Mel Kiper mention that name, I said, oh, eyebrows shot up. Neck sort of cocked to the side. Oh, he's not wrong. Puka Nacua, 2023, out of BYU, 6'2", 210 pounds. So a little bit shorter, but relatively similar measurements. Not quite as explosive, 33-inch vertical, 10'1" broad. And the 40 time is a little bit better, but not by much. He ran a 4.56. Keon Coleman ran a 4.61. The 10-yard splits were exactly the same, 1.62, which is, for a receiver, not all that impressive. But Keon Coleman ran a fantastic gauntlet. You can Google this thing pretty easily. You can go onto Twitter and search it yourself. He is straight down the line, and he is right on the precipice of about 20 miles an hour going through that drill, which was fantastic. I mean, that is, if it's his play speed, if it's his every route run kind of speed, that is really, really good, because, you know, you'll see guys reach 21, 22, maybe even getting close to 23 miles an hour. But a lot of times that is straight line. You've had some time to build some momentum, and there just aren't all that many opportunities to do that kind of thing in the league. So if Keon Coleman's play speed is better than his timed speed, because relative to other players and how they're moving on the field in real time, you factor in his size on top of that, okay, now you might be talking about a real factor. But Puka Nacua really impressed on that gauntlet drill too. It was really controlled. And at the time, I can remember people talking about it. He still ends up going in the 5th round, again, partly because of the test numbers, but he ends up having this fantastic season. So can Keon Coleman be schemed up? Can he be schemed open, I should say, in the way that Puka Nacua was? Is his play style and his play speed just different than it was in Indianapolis at the Combine, the way it was clearly for Puka Nacua last season? That has to be your pie in the sky hope, if that's how the NFL draft ends up shaking out in just a couple weeks. Because if you get Keon Coleman, I get it on the one hand, in that if you pass on him there aren't a ton of big-bodied receivers later in the draft. We talked about Jalen McMillan, who's not a small cat. Luke McCaffrey out of Rice, Christian's brother, has pretty good length and is a pretty good athlete. You know, Bub Means, that we talked about on the last podcast, who's our 7th round pick in our 7th round Patriots specific mock draft. You know, these guys are all going to have better 40 times than Keon Coleman. But Coleman clearly knows how to play football and had a successful college career. And there was a reason Mel Kiper thought he was a top half of the 1st round kind of player during the season last season. And he falls out of the 1st round just because of the 40 time. Is that dumb? Is it legit? I think for Patriots fans who remember N'Keal Harry and the 40 that he ran in the 4.5s, they would say, yeah, no, we're good. We're good. Big and not real fast. No, thank you. So it would take some real courage for Elliott Wolf and Drake Maye to invest in Keon Coleman in the 2nd round. But I like Mel Kiper's reasoning, and I like the fact that he's standing on business. He has his opinion on this player. He thinks he's a good player. He thinks he's better than maybe a lot of people would say. And he doesn't care. And so I like that about Mel Kiper. We got some great nuggets from him this week. I know we teased a Spencer Rattler interview earlier this week on the previous edition of the Next-Pats. We're going to hold that because we got more than we thought we would get, quite frankly, from Mel Kiper that was Patriot specific, Patriot related. So we want to just make this a Mel Kiper focused episode, talking quarterbacks, talking receivers, and we will roll out that Spencer Rattler edition of Next-Pats in the very near future. We will have 2 more episodes for you next week, and then we're on to draft week. We are almost there, guys. I promise. It's right around the corner. 2 weeks from when we're recording this today, you should be hearing us on Friday. We appreciate you for listening. We appreciate John the Skull Crusher Henry, as always. We appreciate Mel Kiper. Thanks so much for listening, guys. We'll have, again, 2 more episodes for you next week. We'll talk to you then.